Boruto Vortex Chapter 35 is what happens when the universe decides it's tired of letting everyone pretend that they're in control and teaches the lesson that having power and having control, they are two very different things. Jura is catching feelings. Kawaki just found out that he's basically on parental controls with his power level. Kashin Koji went from seeing the future to getting kidnapped at his own hideout. Somehow, the guy cloned from one of the greatest shinobi ever, Jura, who can literally see multiple timelines, was the least prepared person in the entire chapter. We open up this new arc with the story focusing in on Jura, who informs Hidari that Mamushi is dead, and it's here that he explains both to Hidari and to readers why Mamushi ultimately was defeated. Mamushi represented obsessive love that turned into a predatory form of lust, which, as twisted as it is, Jura calls that a form of love. With Mamushi believing this emotion could allow the shinju as a species to prosper, and yet, because he gave into a primal emotion, Jura notes that it led to his downfall. Befitting, given that Mamushi got dumber and more primal the more clones that he created. However, upon hearing all this, Hidari doesn't respond to Jura's monologue with an in-depth philosophical answer, but instead Hidari directly asks the question that every reader of the story has wondered: why did you make a point to go out of your way to save me when I was destroyed, and yet when Matsuri, Ryu, and Mamushi were destroyed, you let the thorn so balls be taken away? What we're seeing here is something that you should keep your eyes on, because it's another subtle reminder by Ikimoto that the shinju are made from the chakra of whoever they consume. In this case, Hidari was modeled after Sasuke. That sharp and very pointed question is framed in a way that leaves very little wiggle room to get out of, while also cutting through the pointless question that Jura asked him. That is extremely Sasuke coded. Sasuke is not the type to be drawn into a conversation about why Mamushi was defeated. It's something that is already done, but he would take advantage of the conversation to reframe the conversation in a subtle way to address Jura's change in behavior. Jura's pause and then his response they are telling as Hidari watches him with a very closeful eye. He says straight up that he never thought much of it, but that basically he would have felt lonely if Hidari was defeated and he was gone forever, which leads to Jura's confession, causing Hidari to say that he's got the ick. And while Ada's watching on very confused about what it is that she's seeing, but buried beneath all that humor is a dark seed being planted when you remember what Jura has been obsessed with trying to figure out, which is the emotion of love and how it leads to power-ups. Everything that Jura saw from the moment he came to Konoha was that shinobi can tap into hidden power when they find themselves about to lose love or lose something or someone that is precious to them. Now Jura is forming that attachment with Hidari right before the battle lines are beginning to shift towards a Hidari versus Sarada and Boruto rematch, which is why this scene works so well as an opening. Meanwhile, Sarada leaves out the store that sells glasses, testing out her stronger glasses that are supposed to help her with her vision loss, and is immediately greeted with a kunai that has a whirlpool spiral on it, and when she looks up, she sees Boruto in the sky, and he's pointing before Boruto flies away, and Sarada chases after him. We then shift over to Inojin in a conversation with Kashin Koji, whose toad is attached inside of his hoodie, and Inojin is told bluntly, "You now work for me. If you're asleep, you better be ready to answer when I call. If you're taking a dump, you better be ready to work whenever I call. You are my personal cell phone right now. Whoever I need to speak to, and whenever I need to speak to them, you need to link me immediately." This is a very, very harsh pill for Inojin to swallow. If he thought that his alliance with Kashin Koji was done after Mamushi, who killed Himawari in another timeline, then Inojin had another thing coming. He's in it for the long haul. On the other side of Konoha, we see Amado's toad leading Kawaki back to the lab, where Amado tells Kawaki sit tight while he finishes up on his work, and he answers Kawaki's question about what's the deal with all these toads that are in the lab. Basically, they're the same type of species that Kashin Koji uses. They're scientifically made and they're not real toads, which makes it possible for Kawaki to shrink them using his Kokugan eye that he inherited from Ishiki, and this was a nice bit of confirmation thrown into the story. Back during Boruto Part 1, when Kashin Koji fought against Ishiki, that toad was shrank by Ishiki's dojutsu, and it was something that threw everyone for a loop at the time because the Kokugan jutsu, known as the Sukuna Hikona, wasn't supposed to be able to shrink objects outside of the user in terms of living objects, and yet it shrank shrank the toad. Now we have 100% confirmation that they are ninja tech devices. They're not living beings, which is why they could be shrank, and also why nobody knew that Jiraiya's clone was out there, because at Mount Miyoboku there was never going to be a new name contracted on that toad ceiling scroll, which is a really big IQ move by Amado to stay under the radar and also have a Sage Mode user at his beck and call without someone like Naruto knowing he existed until Amado wanted Naruto to know. Kawaki, being irritated, tells Amado, cut out all the yapping, and for a second you can tell that this is something Kawaki is dead serious about. He says, tell me what it is that you wanted me to come to the lab for, because this damn sure isn't it. Amado, his computer display shows that Kawaki's power distribution is at an 85% attack power to a 15% defensive power split, and this rightfully pisses Kawaki off because he reminds him this was not what we agreed upon. He wanted a full 100% access to Ishiki's attack power, and Amado hits Kawaki right in his ego with his response by telling him that he's the guy who had performance issues when it mattered the most, and so he doesn't have any room to be lecturing Amado. And this is brilliant character writing and interactions, because it's Ikimoto showing us how sly Amado truly is, and how even when backed into a corner seemingly where he has no options, he's able to regain the framing of a situation at the drop of a dime. Back when Kawaki demanded the full attack power, Amado warned him that doing so will leave Kawaki too vulnerable to attacks, and we now know he intentionally raised his attack power, but he kept it below 100%, and he allowed Kawaki to taste defeat and to be forced to watch as others had to continue fighting without him. For a character like Kawaki, whose only measure of self-worth is his power level and how he can use that power to protect Naruto, Amado pressed the right button on Kawaki, and by the silence, Kawaki knows everything Amado just said was absolutely correct. However, Amado takes the silence to gain more of a high ground position by saying, look, don't complain or don't be mad at me. Let's talk about how we can make your ambitions a reality. And during the time that Amado is speaking, one of the toads jumps onto Kawaki's neck, and right away Kawaki notices that something changed. He's been given 100% of Ishiki's attack power, and Amado confidently smokes with a smile on his face, saying that everything that happened was because of Amado's own will. The reason that he's smoking is because he just made a power play. Prior to all of this, Kawaki had literally been picking Amado up by the neck on 2 separate occasions and threatening him multiple times that he won't revive Amado's daughter unless he gets everything that he wants. He played the same card Ishiki did on Amado via the flashback in Boruto chapter 75, but Amado is showing, just as he played the long game on Ishiki and waited to destroy Jigen and then destroy Ishiki, he's done the same thing with Kawaki. Amado is the one in control of Kawaki, despite Kawaki being physically stronger. Kawaki has a weaponized Karma Seal. He can use it in combat, but ultimately it's Amado who calls all the shots here as things stand in this moment. Amado paints the picture very simply. The toad that is on your neck allows me to adjust your power at will. 1 minute you can be at full power, the next minute you can be at full defensive power. I can switch between them whenever I want, but think of the benefits. When you aren't fighting, I'll just divert all your chakra towards defense, which makes it damn near impossible for you to be killed. Even if you're off guard, you'll be safe. And when you do go into combat, I'll raise the attack power to 100%. This is basically Amado using ninja tech to do a very simple principle of handling chakra that goes back to Naruto Part 1. Chakra can be used to amp up your speed, like we see with the Raikage, strength like we see with Tsunade, stamina like we see when Kakashi had the Sharingan, defense, the best example being how Kabuto, when he saw Naruto's Rasengan, he quickly gathered chakra into his stomach where the attack was going to land, did it preemptively to blunt the damage and recover from an attack that would have otherwise killed him. On the other hand, we see examples like with Madara, where he got taken out by Zetsu off guard because he was not actively molding chakra for defense at that point. When Kawaki hears the benefits of what Amado's doing, he feels a brief moment of shame, comparing what Amado did and saying, hey fam, like this is cheating. Yet Amado is basically one step ahead of him, letting Kawaki get his moment to speak, and then he tells him that what he's talking about doing using the toes attached to Kawaki's body is the same thing that Shinobi shinobi do when they do chakra control, allotting the right amount of chakra resources so as to not waste chakra too quickly, like Kid Naruto wasted chakra and like how Kawaki wasted resources in the Mamushi fight. He drives home this point by saying, since Kawaki hates the shinobi method of training, evident by Naruto's attempt to train Kawaki after the Delta fight and Sarada's attempt to train Kawaki in Boruto chapter 58, Kawaki hears this and accepts the use of technology, which I find fascinating for two reasons. Number one, when Naruto trained Kawaki, he specifically told him, stop relying on your ninja tools and start using your chakra. Number two, we're seeing a darker take on the relationship between Boruto and Katasuke in terms of what it would have been had Boruto never learned the lesson of hard work that Naruto and Sasuke drilled into him. Just as Boruto would have continued to go back to Katasuke for more ninja tech, Kawaki is accepting more ninja tech upgrades from Amado. What's very interesting about these toads is that Kawaki can also shrink them down to 1 inch in size, but also maintain the benefits, meaning nobody would ever know that he basically had a chakra amplifier on his body, and that is very clever. Amado, after knowing he has Kawaki on the hook, begins to reel him in, and when this happens, Kawaki tries to regain some of the framing by saying, look, if you want me to revive your daughter in exchange for this power-up, then we're not revisiting that deal. I will revive her after I kill all the shinju. But Amado sits there like an experienced fisherman who has a fish on the hook, and he doesn't pull too hard right away. He tells him, I have no intention of arguing with you about that. We agreed on it, that's fine. But instead, I want you to do something else for me that is of near equal importance. Meanwhile, Sarada finally catches up to Boruto, who is sitting beneath a giant tree, and as Sarada joins him, we get one of those rare moments in Boruto 2 Blue Vortex where Boruto drops the stoic and calculated expression, and we see the happy-go-lucky son of Naruto rise to the surface for once. He's smiling as Sarada sits down, and when she tries to apologize for the scar that he got over his eye back in part 1 of the story, when he protected her from Kawaki's killing attack, Boruto turns it around with a joke that, depending on the translation you read, he's basically saying that it makes him more attractive, so he doesn't really mind the scar, which brings a smile to Sarada's face. And then some time passes, and Boruto gets right down to business. He tells Sarada that Code is targeting her, that he's going to take her hostage and to the Shinju to lure Boruto in as bait. He says that Code has placed claw marks all around the village, that he did so when Mamushi invaded Konoha, and that it makes him a danger to appear at any point in time. But Boruto's big plan is simple, but it's also dangerous. He hands Sarada 2 flying Raijin markers that he possesses, and he says he wants her to intentionally allow herself to be captured by Code, and when this happens, he wants Sarada to throw the marker the moment they get to their final destination so that he can teleport towards her, informing her that she needs to throw the marker so that it's easier for him to sense the location of the marker, which is yet another reminder of how inferior Boruto's flying Raijin is compared to Minato's, who could sense people and track them without any type of issues. If Minato marked you, you were as good as dead. Boruto then states that no matter what happens, Sarada must not ever give up hope, and that their plan, it is a dangerous one, and I really love what Ikimoto did here. This goes beyond Boruto's promise to Sasuke to protect Sarada and the flashback of 2 Blue Vortex chapter 5. This is Boruto once again treating Sarada not as a damsel, but as an equal. He is the future Shadow Hokage. She is the future Hokage. He's trusting in her when the time comes to fight against Code, just as he trusted her against Hidari. He's leaning on her strength. While shippers will single out this interaction as sign 100,001 that Boruto and Sarada are in love, video will be linked down in the description box if that's your thing. This is a clear trust in Sarada's ability, and emphasis on teamwork is something that we should be paying a primary focus to, especially since Boruto's telling Sarada up front, and he's not withholding information about the mission the way that Amado or Kashin Koji would. Back at the Shinju hideout, we get another subtle hint that Sasuke's chakra is beginning to peek through the surface right here with Hidari. All those books that Hidari was reading in the last arc, they weren't books with words on them. Instead, they were cat books, or rather a cat book, because Hidari was only ever looking at one book in particular. At first glance, you might look at this as a throwaway scene, but there are 2 things under the surface here that are hidden in plain sight. We know from the last couple of arcs that the shinju are subconsciously affected by the chakra of the host, primarily their emotions as more time passes on. It's why Matsuri was in love with Konohamaru, because Moegi loves Konohamaru romantically. It's why Bug was obsessed with Ada, but he had a built-in fear of Damon's power due to the memories in Bug's chakra. Hidari, looking at that cat book, is also not random. The Uchiha clan, they have their connection to Nekaba, the grandmother of Kiba's girlfriend Tamaki. Nekaba is the cat lady who supplied the Uchiha clan for generations, and Sasuke and Itachi both played with those cats during their childhood. Even during Sasuke's redemption journey, there are times where we saw that he had a soft spot for cats, like Sasuke's Sunrise, the illustration that Kishimoto drew after the Naruto manga ended. Sasuke was feeding a cat. An even deeper cut here is that the cat in question drawn on the page for the book that Hidari is looking at is the same species as the one that Ikimoto owns in real life that he's drawn in the author comment sections of the manga a few times in the past. This is both an in-universe connection to explain Hidari's interest in cats, but also an author intent answer. Basically, small Easter eggs that authors will slip into a story to reward the hardcore fans. As we move forward into the story, keeping an eye on Hidari and his interactions is going to be key, because as more time has gone by since his debut in chapter 4, he has continued to show more Sasuke Uchiha traits over time. It's setting the stage very slowly for the eventual confrontation with Sarada, and how he acts during that moment in time is going to tell us everything. Elsewhere inside the village, we get another red flag, which is Amado is out moving and about in the village tracking down Inojin. Now, you might ask, hey, why is this a red flag? But if you go back to Boruto Part 1, the conditions of Amado's citizenship in the Konoha were very, very clear. He was to give over all his research and technology to Katasuke's company, and Sumire was his lab assistant, but he was also forbidden from ever leaving that lab without the express permission of the Hokage at the time, which was Naruto, or Shikamaru, the advisor to Naruto. Naruto may be considered dead in universe, but Shikamaru is the acting Hokage and has a major grudge against Amado. So seeing him out and about in this moment, specifically looking for Inojin, it should raise an eyebrow. He tells Inojin to take a look at the data scroll that he has, which contains info from the Mamushi battle. Amado tells the gullible Inojin to give it to Boruto's accomplice and states that Kashin Koji should know what to do with the data when he gets it before he walks away. Inojin waits for a moment, asking if Kashin Koji knows what will happen from here on out, and we learn that Kashin Koji has not yet gained a vision update of the future using 10 directions, and he reminds us as the audience that everything that we've seen so far has been happening on a brand new timeline branch that is drastically different from whatever Kashin Koji had previously seen. Koji states that he won't look at the contents of the scroll until after he gets another update, showing us that even Kashin Koji doesn't fully trust Amado, and it's for a really good reason. Amado is the person who sent him off to die on a suicide mission. Kashin Koji then has his toad pick up the scroll, and as he reverse summons the toad back to the hideout and picks up the scroll, Kashin Koji's eyes immediately detect that something's off with the scroll, particularly the brush at the edge of it, which suddenly begins to move, and Kashin Koji's eyes quickly dart around the room as he begins searching for anything that doesn't belong in Orochimaru's abandoned hideout. And lurking in his blind spot as he draws his kunai is Kawaki, standing there calmly with his arms stretched out with Amado's toad that is in his hand, which utters the shutdown code that Amado implanted into Kashin Koji when he cloned him of Jiraiya's DNA and inserted the ninja tech into his body to make him a cyborg. This is pretty huge because it pays off a plot point that is almost 7 years in the making. After Kashin Koji saw Amado shut down Delta, Kashin Koji wondered to himself whether or not Amado had a sequence programmed into him as well, and just after Ishiki saw Kashin Koji escape, he stated that Koji would probably return like a stray dog to his master and go off to die. Almost 7 years later, we're finally getting the payoff to that moment, because Amado orders Kawaki to grab hold of this toad so that it can reverse summon all of them back to the hideout, and we end off with the narrator informing us that Amado has kidnapped Kashin Koji. For the first chapter in a brand new arc, this one had a lot of moving parts in terms of things being set up for future plot points. points. Boruto and Sarada versus Code was set up. The situation with Hidari and Jura was set up. Hidari versus Boruto and Sarada got more layers added to it. Kawaki got a power-up, but in exchange for it, Amado regained some leverage. Boruto just lost the person who can see the future, and Shikamaru, who is still under investigation by the Chancellor to the Feudal Lord, Kobu. Shikamaru just lost a very well-informed ally at a very critical point in time, because Kobu's last words to Shikamaru after seeing him work with Boruto was that he'll have his head for treason, and his investigation was still ongoing. Both Boruto and Shikamaru potentially are about to be forced to rely on their own genius level IQ to navigate the turbulent waters ahead. On the other hand, we got long-term storytelling paid off, from Amado finally being used for that Chekhov's gun known as Kashin Koji's shutdown code, and Ishiki's dialogue that Kashin Koji and Amado would meet again. We've been waiting since 2020 to see this paid off, and it's finally happened. We also saw exactly what Momoshiki warned Kawaki about back in Boruto chapter 26, where he told him that if he kept trusting in Amado and being used by others, it would result in Kawaki being fed to Ten Tails. And while Kawaki has not been fed to a Ten Tails, what we do see here is that Kawaki once again is getting further into bed with Amado, despite knowing Amado's not a good guy. Some doors were closed, while others they open up wider, or they open for the very first time. In what is a very dialogue heavy chapter that mainly served as a setup chapter with plot points that won't be addressed in a long time. I'm going to give this one a rating of 4 out of 5 ramen bowls, but this is not a strong 4. If you give this a 3 out of 5, I'm not going to argue with you. The art and the paneling, they were well done here, and I didn't feel like there was too much information to process. I thought it was structured in a way where it was all very easy to digest. Though if you have a TikTok attention span, all that dialogue might have made your brain short circuit, which if that's the case, never read Hunter x Hunter or Jujutsu Kaisen. However, with a chapter like this, it is hard to effectively grade because it can rise or fall depending on what happens when all the seeds are planted in this finally fully bloom. While that's it for the review, click here for the Boruto full story playlist, which starts off with the mega review of Boruto Part 1, followed by recaps of all the Boruto 2 Blue Vortex story arcs, including in a couple of days the full recap for the Mamushi arc that just wrapped up, or click here for my latest video from my Everything One Piece Explained channel.